first great horror story in Western literature is the Odyssey, and it is set in the terrifying open sea. Homer taught us that the open sea is the secret birthplace of the Gothic. It is where humans are most isolated, prey to the elements, and ultimately the shadows of their own minds. It is that feeling when you're swimming at the beach, something brushes your leg, and for a split second, you forget that you're a rational adult and you truly panic. That is the core of the Nautical Gothic. From the gargantuan kraken to the biblical Leviathan, sea beasts have always haunted us. But medieval maps, specifically the Olaus Magnus's Carta Marina of 1539, took this fear and made it scientific. They literally believed every land animal had a horrifying ocean twin. So imagine a sea pig. It is a hybrid of fish and a swine with dragon feet and boar tusks. On the Morse, walrus-like nightmare with teeth designed to shred hulls. These monsters weren't just decoration, they were warnings. The Morse, for example, marked the dangerous waters north of Iceland. They were the medieval way of saying, do not go here or you will die. We still do this today, by the way. Look at Stephen Sommers' movie Deep Rising. You have the luxury liner Argonautica full of mercenaries and treasure hunters, so basically modern pirates. They are getting hunted by the Octalus. It's the exact same fear that the Olaus Magnus had us believing in 500 years ago, that if you go too deep, something ancient and hungry is waiting to come up and meet you. Anyway, welcome back to the Elemental Gothic. I am Ashmita, and this is part 2 of our series where we move beyond the usual haunted houses to rediscover the horror of the elements. So earth, air, fire, and water. We have already covered the horror of the ice in a previous episode, and this is the second one. So today we are venturing into the Nautical Gothic, the horror of the abyss. Sea monsters eventually all but disappeared from our maps as we explored the globe, but they didn't just vanish. They just moved into our literature and art. We see this transition in Shakespeare, in Coleridge, and in Melville. I will also talk in detail about nautical horror in Japanese manga and the differences in aesthetic and ecological vision between Western and Japanese sea horror. I think that classic horror readers and fans should care about Japanese sea horror manga because of how visceral the art and the horror is. But first, let's talk about Shakespeare's The Tempest. Many of us have read it in high school as a romance or a comedy, but there is a nightmare hiding within. It draws upon the real-life 1609 shipwreck of the sailing ship called Sea Venture near Bermuda. So Shakespeare's Ariel isn't just a cute fairy, he represents the storm itself, the same force behind a million shipwrecks in human history. And Ariel's famous song, if you remember, it goes like, "Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes." Creepy, huh? The ocean isn't just killing the father, it is reprocessing him. So it turns human structures like bones and eyes into oceanic structures like corals or pearls. So sure, it is beautiful, but it is also the ocean saying, I am going to turn your dad into jewelry. That is creepy. Now this leads us to a central theme of Nautical Gothic, that of devolution. So ocean doesn't just drown you, it changes you. We see this with Caliban in The Tempest. He is often read as a symbol of the colonized, which is undeniable, but look at his biology. Prospero calls him a tortoise. Trinculo calls him a strange fish. He is the missing link between man and sludge. This is the same terror that we also see in H.P. Lovecraft's The Shadow Over Innsmouth. The deep ones are terrifying because they represent the collapse of the barrier between the land and the sea. It's that scene where the human neck starts to itch and suddenly gills open up. It's gross, it's slimy, it's primal. So this is the fear that I'm talking about, the fear of dissolution. The ocean dissolves wood and iron, and eventually, if you stay too long, it dissolves your humanity. Basically, the ocean wants to turn you back into a fish. And frankly, looking at the state of the world right now, maybe the fish is having the right idea. Anyway, but then again, the oceanic entities coming to the land are scary. I once knocked a piece of seaweed in a frantic panic, and then I didn't go back into the water for a year. Well, that's an aside. If you want to see exactly what that biological collapse looks like, you have to look at Gou Tanabe's manga adaptation of The Shadow Over Innsmouth. I love all his Lovecraft adaptations, but this one is especially one of the favorite ones. Lovecraft famously described his monsters as indescribable or nameless. Gou Tanabe didn't get that memo. He draws the deep ones with hyper-realistic intensity, with a lot of shadows. Tanabe wants he wants to take the abstract fear of the ocean and make it sickeningly physical. Now, there is no denying that in Shakespeare and in Lovecraft, there is an inescapable association between the fear of dissolution and racism. Because let's be real, when Lovecraft wrote about the degenerated hybrid creatures taking over a nice New England town, he wasn't just talking about fish. He was talking about the fear of mixing races. Apparently, Lovecraft discovering his Welsh ancestry and his great-grandmother played a role in shaping that story. When we come to the Renaissance, from the Renaissance to the Romantics, Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I have a copy here, is the undisputed king of the Nautical Gothic. An old sailor crashes a wedding to forcefully tell a terrifying story. He describes a sea voyage which was going well until he just decides to kill an albatross, which was actually guiding the ship so far. Now, bad luck 101 ensues and the wind just stops. And I'm going to quote here, "As idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean, the crew is stranded in a windless hell. They witness a ghost ship carrying death and life in death, gambling for their souls. All of the crew drop dead, but the mariner survives, and he is cursed to wander the earth forever telling his story." If you really want to feel the dread of Coleridge's Ancient Mariner, look at Gustave Doré's wood engravings. This is the copy in which you would get those engravings. The dense lines and the chiaroscuro, or the interplay of light and shadow, they perfectly capture the claustrophobic atmosphere. I'm going to show you here a couple of pictures like this one, and then the pictures of the albatross, yeah, look at the shadow work here, the interplay of light and shadow. It captures that haunted seascape. So Doré shapes Coleridge's haunting, especially the icy ones, and it becomes a sort of his defining aesthetic force, the force of the Nautical Gothic. So rather than just a lighting technique, this acts as a visual metaphor for the poem's supernatural and psychological tensions. Now, Coleridge establishes the Gothic ship trope in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which is likely drawing upon the legend of the Flying Dutchman. This legend tells the story of a ghost ship as a cursed entity that forever exists in liminal spaces like the equator or the Antarctic. We all know this from the Pirates of the Caribbean, probably, a ship crewed by the undead sailing forever. But the OG version is even darker. There is a criminally underrated novel from 1839 called The Phantom Ship by Frederick Marryat. Marryat was a British naval officer himself, so he knew the sea well. So the story follows Philip Vanderdecken. He finds out his dad is captain of the Flying Dutchman, cursed to sail until Judgment Day because he made a deal with the devil to beat a storm. Now, Philip joins the Dutch East India Company to hunt down the ghost ship and free his father using a holy relic. It's an epic quest of redemption. So it's basically Star Wars but wet. And instead of Darth Vader, the dad is a ghost pirate, which is cooler in ways, I would say. We cannot talk about the Gothic ship trope without mentioning the ultimate American example, Herman Melville's Moby Dick. Published in 1851, this is one of the most seminal works of Nautical Gothic. Melville transforms the ocean into a vast haunted space filled with terror and madness. The ship, the Pequod, functions exactly like a Gothic castle in some ways. It is isolated, it is claustrophobic, and it is ruled by a tyrant. Think of Captain Ahab. He's not just any bad boss. He is a demonic Gothic villain. He is Dracula in a sailor hat. And the white whale, Moby Dick, represents the Sublime, which is a force so massive and so terrifying that it destroys the mind. The book, I think, blends traditional Gothic tropes with maritime adventure. And the most scary part isn't that the whale is a massive, ferocious animal, of course. I think the most scary part is that the whale feels like a punishment from God. Now, my favorite book of Nautical Gothic that I cannot recommend enough is William Hope Hodgson's The Ghost Pirates. Hodgson was a sailor before he was a writer, and he has written many stories of sea horror. I'm so excited about Hodgson. I keep mispronouncing his name. Hodgson is an important precursor to Lovecraft and C.L. Moore in the tradition of the weird. And it is a key ancestor to the 21st century writers such as China Melville. Here's why William Hope Hodgson is a nautical Gothic genius. Now, usually when we think of Gothic horror, we think of a castle. You know the vibe, stone corridors, dungeons, locked rooms, and so on. But Hodgson realized that a ship is just a Gothic castle turned inside out. So Maud Ceastus, which is the name of the ship in the Ghost Pirates, creates this vertical labyrinth. There is a scene where a crew member sees a man climbing the main rigging all the way up the royal yard. It creates this terrifying geometry where there is literally nowhere to run because you're trapped in a wooden cage suspended between the stars and the black water. And the ghosts in this book, they aren't wispy, floating, disembodied spirits like we think of ghosts. Rather, these things, they come out of the sea, and when they step on a rope, the rope goes taut. When they climb the rail, these sea thingies, the ship actually heels over from their weight. So it suggests that this isn't just any haunting, it is an invasion. But the scariest part is not the monsters, it's the isolation. There's this moment where the ship gets swallowed by a thinnish haze, and the crew realizes that they are effectively doing a blind man's buff, if you know what I mean, into the abyss. They can see other ships passing by, they shout, they fire flares, but the other ships, they just can't see them. So they haven't died yet, but they have ceased to exist in the known world. So they themselves are ghosts before they are dead. And that to me is the ultimate nautical Gothic nightmare. I have this book here and I bought this rather expensive volume. It's the collected fiction of William Hope Hodgson, volume 1. But the story that I am talking about is not in this, but there is another story, The Boats of the Glengarrick and Other Nautical Adventures. So if you can, have a look at this volume and another volume if you can find, because I mean, this is just beautiful. I mean, look at the cover. And there's also, there's also this like illustration with a map like feeling into it. It's like a nautical map. So yeah, it just gives you all the right vibes. Okay, before we leave the West and move to the Eastern Nautical Gothic, we have to talk about two things that made the ocean really, really scary for an entire generation. Jaws, which was written, of course, by Peter Benchley and directed by Steven Spielberg. If Moby Dick is about the providential whale chase led by the Gothic gloom and the doom of Captain Ahab, then Jaws is about the ocean as a meat grinder. Spielberg stripped away the poetry and left us with pure biological terror. The shark isn't a symbol, it's an eating machine for real. It marked the moment when the Nautical Gothic stopped being about cursed voyages and started being about the food chain. It reminded us that the moment you enter the water, you are instantly demoted from being the apex predator to snack. So Stephen King took that biological fear and made it weird in his short story The Raft from Skeleton Crew. The monster isn't a shark this time, it's a shapeless oil slick blob that digests you if you touch the water. It's the ultimate, the floor is lava nightmare, but on a lake. This story is crucial because it bridges the gap between the animal attacks of the 70s and the surreal body horror we see in modern fiction. And it proves that the scariest thing in the water it isn't always a fish. Sometimes it's just water getting lumpy and hungry. If Western Nautical Gothic is about the sublime terror of the open ocean, think Moby Dick or The Isolation of the Lighthouse, Japanese horror manga asks a much more uncomfortable question. What if the ocean decides to walk up the beach and knock on your door? In the West, the sea is scary because it is vast and empty, of course. In the manga, the sea is scary because it is crowded, rotting, and invasive. This is the abject Nautical Gothic, where the terror isn't getting lost at sea, but the sea is vomiting human waste and pressurized nightmares. They are being directed directly into your living room. Junji Ito's Gou is the absolute peak of this nightmare. The story begins with a foul, rot-like smell in a beach house in Okinawa, in which the characters they discover that it is coming from a fish with metallic spider-like legs that have entered their living space. Now, if you think sharks are scary, you can think of sharks and foul-smelling rotten fishes like this trying to enter your bedroom door, prying open your windows with their mechanical spider legs. So Ito strips away the romance of the sea and replaces it with what he calls a death stench. It's a weaponized biological rot that smells so bad that it paralyzes you. Now, Gou isn't just about fish attacking people. It's about the ocean as a viral industrial machine. The walking fish are powered by the gas of their own decay and turning the entire ecosystem into a belching, grotesque machine like this. Okay, so even though Ito's is a different story, it is somehow uncannily reminiscent of H.P. Lovecraft. So in Ito's story, the ocean attacks us. But in Lovecraft's, in Innsmouth, the deep ones walk up to the land. So Lovecraft captures the specific repulsion of the hybrid, which is the idea that the barrier between the human and the thing is permeable, which is also undeniably racial. Now, the protagonist, Robert Olmsted, spends the whole story running from these creatures, only to realize at the end that he is one of them. But I think Lovecraft's vision is still anthropocentric, whereas Ito's is more ecological. Ito's is an eco-horror in its purest form when you realize that the story of the mutated, rotting sea creatures invading land on mechanical spider legs is actually an allegory for the environmental ruin and the consequences of wartime biological weapons and the human waste which is being incessantly deposited in the sea. If Junji Ito creates horror through disgust, Daisuke Igarashi creates horror through awe. Now we have to talk about Children of the Sea. It's the real name is Kaiju no Kodomo. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Most people file this under fantasy genre or coming of age, but actually I think that it is cosmic horror in its purest form. Igarashi taps into the original definition of the sublime, which is the feeling of seeing something so massive, so powerful, or so beautiful that it threatens to annihilate your ego. In Western horror, the ocean is dark and empty in most cases. In Igarashi's ocean, the water is so full of life, ghosts, meteorites, glowing fish, memories, that it feels like it is going to crush you. The art style itself is overwhelming. Igarashi's lines are vibrating and dense. When you look at a page of Junji Ito, you feel like you want to wash your hands. I'm talking about this one here. But looking at a page of Children of the Sea, it will make you feel like you are drowning in light. Children of the Sea capture the thalassophobia or fear of the sea by showing you the sheer scale of the oceanic ecosystem. The story builds to a climax known as the festival. It is technically an apocalypse, but it is a beautiful one. Well, I must mention that there is a scene like that of similar beauty and sublimity also in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but this one is just more visual and impactful. It's the birth of it's something like a birth of a star inside of a whale, and in this scene, one can see that the ocean is like a cosmic womb to which one must return. So, where does that leave us? We have started with the medieval maps, warning of sea pigs, and ended with the birth of the universe inside a whale. The Nautical Gothic is more than just spooky stories about wet ghosts. It is a literature of humility. It reminds us that we are just terrestrial tourists on an aquatic planet. I'm Ashmita and this is the Anticlockwise. Until next time, stay dry and stay humble.